Welcome to the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl I Love, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. And as you know by now, I love sharing positive, uplifting, and inspiring stories about overcoming obstacles and thriving in spite of the hits that life throws our way. Today's guest is kind of like an expert on that topic. His name is David Hollingsworth. He is a full-time dad, an IT executive, speaker, and a part-time athlete. I kind of consider him a full-time athlete, but that's just my humble opinion. He is also a spinal injury survivor. And David has a new book soon to be released titled Get Out the Door. So David, I'm glad you got out the door to come to the show, and welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Cheryl. And thanks to all the listeners for signing in today. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. In 2004, I was learning how to ride a motorcycle and being very safe about the whole thing, wearing a helmet, gloves, jacket, boots, the whole nine yards. And when I was practicing in a elementary school parking lot, the bike got away from me, shot across the parking lot. And before I could get on the clutch and brake to stop, I hit the curb and bounced off the bike and landed right on the corner of the curb, which fractured my L2 vertebra. And according to the emergency room, I had an explosive burst fracture of the L2 vertebra and 60% compression of the spinal canal.
Ooh.
And while they had to stabilize me for 2 days prior to surgery, right before they put me under, the doctor said, "We're going to do everything we can, but I don't know if you're going to walk again." And after a 7.5-hour surgery, I woke up and they had immobilized me in a TLSO brace, which went from my armpits down to my hips. And it took me 2.5 months to learn even to stand and walk again. And by that point, I could walk about 20 feet. Took 6 months to recover at home before I went back to work, and a year before I was released from treatment. And by that point, I could walk a couple miles. I could kind of be normal, but my activity level had reduced quite a bit from prior to the accident. So fast forward about 7-8 years after the accident, I'd become a lot more sedentary. I had to deal with a lot of adjustments in life about not being able to do what I wanted. And I was kind of dissatisfied where I was because I had gained about 80 pounds by that point and knew that I needed to make a change. So because I could ride a bike by that point and because I could walk a lot, I asked my doctor, "Can I run?" And he said, "Yeah, if somebody's chasing you." So I signed up for my first 5K. And I had to learn to run again because my stride had changed quite a bit. And the first time I went out and tried to run, I actually jogged about 60 feet.
Okay.
And went from that to jog 60 feet, walk 60 feet, jog 60 feet. I did that for a while until I was able to actually run my first 5K. And that got me excited to say, wow, I can do something. And over the next 6 months, I went from running a 5K to a 10K to a 10 miler. And by that fall of 2013, I ran the Indianapolis Monumental Half Marathon. And that got me to thinking, I can run a half. Why can't I do a full? And I was talking with someone about kind of bucket list items. What do you want to do? And one of the things I said I wanted to do was to run up the Empire State Building, because you'd seen stair climbs. I think Denver has a stair climb as well. And I made an offhand comment about it, knowing that, like most bucket list things, you don't really do them. You just kind of wait to get around to them before you kick the bucket. About a week later, somebody emailed me and said, "Hey, I can get you in to the Empire State Building run up." And the only trick was I had to raise like $2,500 for charity to do it. So I signed up, and in 2014, as kind of a bucket list anniversary tour of 10 years post the accident, in February, I did a rowing competition. And then 2 days later, I went up to New York to run up the Empire State Building. I did 2 sprint triathlons. I did a bike ride called the Assault on Mount Mitchell. And while not as impressive as the Rockies, it's the tallest mountain east of the Rockies, and finished that bike ride. And in November, 10 years after the accident, where I was told I might not walk again, I ran and finished the Marine Corps Marathon. And prior to the event, I had a local television outlet interview me about the story. And they said, "What was the hardest thing about running a marathon?" And I thought about it, and I said, the hardest thing wasn't recovering from the accident. It wasn't training for the marathon. It wasn't running the race. The hardest thing to do was get out the door. Once I did that, the rest was easy. And it took me 5 years after that to figure out how to write a book about it. But I said, there's the title right there. Because the hardest thing is not doing what you're already doing. It's not continuing on that path. It's getting started. And if you can get started, it makes the rest of all the other obstacles a lot easier to overcome. And that's the message that I'm trying to impart in the book is, don't worry about what's way down the road. Don't worry about how you're going to get there. Get started. The rest you'll be able to figure out.
Excellent message and an excellent point. And it's so true. All you have to do is take that first step. And that first step is absolutely the hardest one to take. And that's something I experienced in my martial arts journey, but I won't go into that because that book is coming out eventually. But anyway, I have several questions for you.
Sure.
What made you decide to learn how to ride a motorcycle? And how old were you at the time? And what was the driving force?
Oh, sure. It's, I've always had little lists of things that I wanted to do. And one was to learn how to ride a motorcycle. I was 43 at the time.
Okay.
And so, midlife crisis type thing, go out, buy a Corvette, go ride, whatever. But I wanted to be very safe and safety conscious while I was doing this. So I made sure I researched everything. I didn't even go out and get a Harley, like you go out and get a Harley Davidson. This was a little Honda Rebel 250. So it was born to be mild. It was the smallest street legal bike I could buy. But what I didn't realize was even something that small can get away from you. And sometimes, life happens. It throws things in front of you that you don't expect.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the impetus was I wanted to do something fun that I didn't normally do. And it led to something that I didn't expect.
And it wasn't fun, basically. But you managed to turn it around in a way that is just absolutely so impressive. But I just want a couple of other things I wanted to ask you, because I am, as I told you, a recovering physical therapist. So when you had the accident, did you lose consciousness?
No, I never lost consciousness. But there were a lot of points where I was trying to figure out what was going on, because as soon as I hit the ground, I knew I'd been hurt.
Right.
But I had to make sense of what was happening around me. Somebody fortunately saw the accident happen and called 911. And I could hear lots of people kind of chattering around me, but it was all muffled because I had a helmet on. And I wiggle my fingers to see if I can do that. And then wiggle my toes, and my left toes wiggled, and then my right toes didn't work. And I realized at that point that I could not feel my right leg.
Oh.
So initially my right leg was paralyzed and had no sensation in it whatsoever. Fortunately, as soon as they went in during surgery and relieved the pressure on the spinal canal, that sensation came back. But it took me 2.5 months in the hospital to regain enough strength through lots of physical therapy
Mm-hmm.
to even stand.
Mm-hmm.
And then to walk on parallel bars and to walk with a walker, then to kind of have them take the walker away from you, stagger forward a couple feet and hope you're not going to fall. But I had to work with some great physical therapy people. And the nurse who was on duty the night I came in to the rehab hospital, she never saw me in PT.
Mm-hmm.
And about a week before I was discharged, I said, and by the way, her name was Peace. She was from Ghana.
Uh-huh.
And I said, hey, Peace, look at this. So I wheeled my chair up, locked the wheels, pushed myself out of the chair, and then slowly stepped around the nurse's station, came back and fell back in the chair all sweaty. And because she saw me when I came in, she had tears in her eyes. Because she had seen how far I had come
Mm-hmm.
from that point. So even though I may be very optimistic and very upbeat when I'm talking about it, there were a lot of dark times during that period between the accident and when I was discharged. So I don't want to mislead people into thinking all is all hunky-dory and a bed of roses. There was a lot of work involved, not only on my part, but all the people who supported me during that time.
So not only work, the physical work, but just the mental work, because that is such a devastating injury and it's such a horrible situation to be in. And, there's the pain, the frustration, the fear, the anger, the why me, and all of those things just going through your head at the same time as you're trying to heal and trying to recover. And even in the back of your mind, you must have been wondering, will I ever have the life I had before?
Oh, yeah. And something I discovered during that time, when I was growing up, anger was always seen in my family as a bad thing, as something that you weren't allowed to express or allowed to put out there. But once I was in the hospital, and especially when I was trying to build up strength and stand up and take a few steps, was that anger can be an incredibly useful tool. I was mad. I was angry at myself. I was angry at the circumstance. But, it's like Mark Ruffalo in The Avengers. My secret was I was angry all the time. And that helped fuel me to push a little further, to work a little harder, to take just one more step. So I still get angry, but I try to use it as a force for good.
That's so interesting that you say that, because I had an incident that happened when I was 44, and I've talked about it before on the show. And I was angry when it happened. I mean, I was angry. I wanted, some sort of justice or maybe revenge. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember a therapist talking to me and he says, I'm so surprised that you're angry. And I thought, well, who wouldn't be angry? And he said, you should be fearful. You should be this, you should be that. And that made me even angrier. And
don't tell me what I should do. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's actually what led me eventually into martial arts. And so it's amazing. But yeah, when people are trying to tell you what you should feel or what to expect or whatever, that's just so unfair. And that leads me to another question.
Sure.
How did you feel when there you are? You've had this terrible accident. You're in the hospital. You're getting ready to go into surgery. And the surgeon tells you, I don't know, we're going to do our best, but I don't know if you'll ever be able to walk again.
I think he was being brutally honest about the situation. Fortunately for me, at the time, I was pretty doped up. I had a lot of morphine in me. And while I could answer questions, I don't think I realized the extent of what it meant at the time. And it took me, I think the days and a couple weeks after the surgery, I didn't sleep a lot. I mean, I would kind of rest from time to time, but they had me in this clamshell brace where it took, a nurse and an orderly to turn me over, to help move me, to, take care of whatever bodily functions I had to deal with. I mean, they had a catheter in me, had to use a bedpan, all these things that took my personal freedom away from me. So it was pretty incapacitating. And, in fact, I need to bring this up. They had to intubate me at the rehab hospital because I was coughing up so much blood post the accident. And when you're intubated, you can't talk, and technically you can breathe, but it feels like you can't. And they were getting all this stuff out of me. And after having it for like 14 hours, I pinged the nurse and she came in and I wrote down on a pad of paper, I said, take this thing out. Mm-hmm. And she said, I don't know what'll happen. And I wrote down, I don't care. Because that's the way I felt at the time. Fortunately, once they took it out, I could breathe normally and they had gotten everything out that they needed to. But that's probably the low point of where I was. Once we started working on building up strength again, it was very frustrating and very hard, very difficult. But as long as I was making progress, I was good. I was okay because I could do a little bit more than the day before. Mm-hmm. And even if that progress wasn't a straight line, I could see that I had come a certain distance. Mm-hmm. So that motivated me to push a little harder. But I know what it's like to feel like, wow, that part of my life is over. Mm-hmm. Because at the time I felt that it was. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, over time, I was able to build back to a point where I could do, in some ways, more than what I could do prior to the accident.
Mm-hmm. I have to mention this because going back to the intubation, physical therapy was my second career, or is my second career. I was actually a respiratory therapist for 17 years. I went to PT school, so I know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, that is just one of the most frustrating things because they're taking your voice away. I mean, it's done for a reason that's medically necessary, but still, one of the things that I think is the loss of human dignity is just, there you are using the bedpan, everybody's rolling you over and stuff.
Yep.
Having your voice taken away is just so difficult. And I'm also wondering, did you have some lung contusions or anything? Did you have any fractures?
No, fortunately, I did not have any other internal injuries other than the trauma around the L2. Now it was blown apart. It was, fractured on 3 axes. You had an explosive burst fracture on 3 axes with 6% compression of the spinal canal. So they had to get all the pieces and glue them back together. They had to do a bone graft from the hip. They had to do a laminectomy. And I have 2 rods and 4 screws holding all that together. Now, today, they could actually take that hardware out because spine's fused. It doesn't have any issues. But I am bolted together like a car. I have a lot of hardware. The good news is, 16 years later, I don't feel it. Mm-hmm. It took a while to build that strength back up, but it's just part of me. Mm-hmm. It's a difficult part of my life, but it is just a part of me.
So let me ask you this. Here it is 14 years later, right?
Yep.
If you could have seen as you were going through some of your lowest points, we'll take away the intubation part,
sure.
But some of the hardest times as you were going through this, if somebody would have said to you in 2020, this is where you're going to be, what would you have believed it? Or would you have thought, yeah, right?
I think that, life is a crapshoot. There are things that happen that get thrown in front of you. You don't know how you're going to overcome them. There are other things that happen like, wow, I can't believe this happened. Mm-hmm. I can't believe it both bad as well as good. So if you said to me in 2004, you're going to write a book about this journey, I was like, number one, I don't want to do the journey because that sounds difficult. But I think since that time, I've learned how to certainly accept that path that I've been on, because if I hadn't gone through this, would I have done the other things? And I don't know that I would have. So I would encourage people to be thankful for the path that you've been given, because nobody else gets to walk that but you. And I think in one of the original versions of my editor made me take this out because she didn't like the way she thought it sounded, and I'm okay with that. But the last line of the introduction, I said, it's one hell of a story, and it happens to be true. And that's what I would encourage other people to, is to write down what their story is. Because when you're going through it yourself, it's hard to have some perspective on it. And I had to get 5 years post the marathon events to have enough perspective to write the book. Because if I just wrote it about, well, I did this, people will say, well, good for you. And I had to make it less about me or the accomplishment than the journey itself. And it goes like a roller coaster. There's that initial event where something happens and you don't know what's going to happen next. And then all of a sudden you're on that ride and you're going up the hill and down the hill and around the curves, and you have no idea if you're going to make it off the ride, let alone have a story to tell about it. But at the end, when you get off, you're like, wow, I want to get on again. And that's the sort of feeling I wanted people to come away with, was, wow, that is a heck of a story. But also, how does that relate to things that they may be going through?
Exactly.
So not everybody, and I certainly don't wish what I went through on anybody. Most people aren't going to go through some sort of a physical event like that. Also, a lot of people don't want to run a marathon, and that's okay too. But everybody has obstacles they need to overcome, and everybody has things that they want to do. And my message is not that, it's not some old gung-ho motivation, you can do this type thing. It is just get started. Get out the door. Once you do, the rest is easy.
Amazing. I have to ask you this. Prior to the accident, were you an athlete to the level that you are right now?
I don't know that I'm an athlete now. I think in fact, the first line of my introduction in the book is, I'm not an athlete, nor would you mistake me for one. Now, I had run track and cross country in high school. And in 1989, I ran the New York Marathon. And in 1994, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon for the first time. Now, I'm not fast. In fact, in 94, that was the same year Oprah ran the Marine Corps Marathon in DC. And the whole race, the Marines are yelling, Oprah's right behind you. In reality, Oprah's 20 minutes behind me. So I've never been fast, but I have been stubborn. But after the 94 marathon, I didn't do much until 2012.
Wow.
So 18 years after that, because, I had kids, raising kids, doing scouting things and all these other things with the kids. So their lives became the primary focus. And I, was pretty much a dad, not much else, until I felt that I was at a point that I needed to do something.
That struck me as funny, that everybody was yelling at you, Oprah's right behind you. And that just reminded me at the beginning of the episode when you said that you asked your doctor if it would be okay if you started running or if you could run. And he said, well, if there's someone chasing you.
Well, if Oprah's chasing you, then it's okay.
So that was just kind of like very, some kind of prophecy. I thought that was kind of interesting. So other thing I wanted to ask you about was something else that you did recently, because I saw this on social media and I thought it was just absolutely adorable. Okay, I have to say that word. I'm so sorry. But so not only are you this, in my opinion, incredible athlete, because you are, And, this IT executive and all these other things that you do. You're also, what is it? It's Dad's.
Well, the show is called Dads Read Princess Stories.
So you're a dad that reads princess stories too.
Yeah, when I started doing publicity for the book and doing podcasts, and there are podcasts on pretty much any subject that you could imagine. And most of the ones that I've been on have been related to either recovery, transformation, or goal setting, those sorts, because that's kind of the topic of the book. But I got a request from an actor and podcaster out of Vancouver, Canada, who has this podcast called Dads Read Princess Stories. And it's exactly what it sounds like. They're taking dads who come from all walks of life to read stories as if they were reading them to their own daughter. Mm-hmm. And on this episode, I read an Irish version of the Cinderella story called Fair, Brown, and Trembling. And it was an opportunity to do some character voices and do stuff that I really enjoyed doing with my daughter when she was younger, which was to tell stories, because you get to put yourself and put the reader and the listener in a different space and play with their imagination. And the imagination is a very powerful thing. And I just had a blast doing it. And the episode is live, and I'll give you a link that you can send the listeners to.
Okay, because I think it'd be great. And you actually are going to be on the show again in the future as well, right?
Yes, I'm supposed to be doing reading a poem for a Halloween show, and then doing an old Russian folk tale where they're going to bring in lots of different people to read versions of the Baba Yaga tales from Russian folklore.
Ooh, I can't wait for that one.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
So the other thing that you like to focus on is getting past the fear to get to the fun that's on the other side.
Oh yeah, Mike Birbiglia, who's a stand-up comic and storyteller, he has tells a story about how he sleepwalks and how he jumped through a plate glass window while he was sleepwalking. And when he got to the hospital, he said, when they told him he's going to be okay, he's, well, I guess I'll go on living. There are things that happen that, you don't know if you're going to get through at first. But what I found was if you can just keep going, not only will you get through it, but there'll be something exciting on the other side. In one case, I've always had a fear of heights. Mm-hmm. And, didn't like bridges or standing close to the edge of buildings or whatever. And we went on a ziplining tour in Costa Rica with the kids. And that was a lot of fun to do as long as I didn't look down. Uh-huh. But they have a thing called a Tarzan swing where it's only 20 feet off the ground. You have to step off a platform and swing. I couldn't do it. I had to climb back down the ladder twice, although my kids did it just fine. Well, a couple years later, I was in Las Vegas at the Stratosphere Hotel. Mm-hmm. And they have something there called the Sky Jump, where it's a controlled descent from 900 feet above the strip down to this bullseye they painted on the parking lot. I said, I'm going to do that, knowing that I couldn't even step off a 20-foot platform just a couple years earlier. Well, I watched on YouTube how all these people did this and why they did it. And when it came my turn to do it, and the video's up there on my YouTube channel of me, I'm 900 feet above the Las Vegas Strip, and they say 3, 2, 1, jump, and I just went. And it was the most fun I've ever had. And what I realized at that point was that I used to think that fear was a wall that kept me from doing the things that I wanted to do. What I realized after that was it's not a wall, it's a door that you have to step through to the fun, the excitement, the adventure on the other side. But the weird thing is you can't see what it's like on this side of the door.
Right.
The party's all out there. The fun is not on this side. The fun is out there. As Manfred Mann said, that's where the fun is. You have to step through it to experience it. And that ties back into this, the title of this book is once you get out the door, then you get to experience all that. So yeah, you've got to get through that door to the fun on the other side.
So let me ask you this. Do you feel like this experience has made you more courageous?
It all depends on how you define courage.
Well, the way I define it, courage is not the absence of fear.
Right.
Courage is action in the presence of fear.
Oh, yeah. And if you look, even go back to the Wizard of Oz, the Cowardly Lion, when it came down to it, he had that the whole time.
Exactly.
And I don't think you know what kind of courage you have until you have no other choice. Because as long as you can stay up here in your head, I mean, that's where fear shows up. But when it comes time to act, I want to be the person, running into the burning building, because there's somebody who needs something there more than I need to feel safe. And I aspire to be one of those kinds of people. If I had known what I was going to go through with the motorcycle accident, I would have never ridden a motorcycle.
Right.
And even knowing that it's a possibility does give me some pause, because even though I haven't ridden a motorcycle since then, riding a bike, I got hit by a car in 2008, and yeah, as they say, I got better.
Was it like was that like a flashback of like, oh my God, here I go again?
I was more angry than anything else. I was crossing a city street. They had 2 lanes of traffic. One side stopped, and then the other side stopped. So it was safe to go. While somebody 3 cars back either was looking at their phone or not paying attention or just not wanting to wait, they went around the line of cars on the right through the parking spaces. So I started to clear the vehicle, the car in front. And then as soon as I did, I'm up on the hood and went up on the hood and back down to the street. I'm still attached to the bike because my pedals are clipped in. And the guy gets out and starts to pull me off the bike. I'm like, get your hands off of me. So I was more angry than anything else. Fortunately, I did have a slight fracture, but it was not serious. I didn't have to have any treatment for it, or any cast or any immobilization for it. And it took 3 years to settle it out, litigation wise.
Right.
But, life happens. Stuff happens that you're not quite ready for. And whether it's courage or not, I think the motto that I have to look at is, yeah, stuff happens and I can handle it. That, stuff will get thrown your way and you'll think, well, can I get through this? Yeah, you can handle this. And that's what I would encourage the listeners to remember, is when they get something that life throws at them, you can handle this. You may not be able to see the other side of it yet, but keep moving forward, keep taking those steps, and you'll either find a way over it, under it, around it, or right through it. And that to me is what courage is continuing to move forward despite all the other noise that happens. It's not some big feat of strength. It's the determination to keep moving forward.
I have one last question, especially when you said the way you were raised, it wasn't polite or good manners, really, to be angry. No. Yeah. Does it feel good to get angry?
It depends on the situation. There are times when, and I have to make a distinction. Okay, is this like Samuel L. Jackson? Is this righteous anger? Is it being used for good? Or am I just mad because I'm stuck in traffic or something that I need to let go?
Right.
Is this worth getting angry about? And that's been the big distinction, is there are some things that, it's not important enough to be angry about it. That is their problem, not mine. It's not my circus nor my monkeys. I'm going to let them have that. But I think the big realization has been, there are some things that are worth getting angry about and taking action to make the situation better. It doesn't mean that you're all out of control. It's you're doing what's necessary, you know, because that's what the right thing to do is. Sometimes it's worth getting angry because the situation warrants it.
Okay, great. So now tell us, when is your book going to be released? When's it going to be available?
It's going to be available this fall. I don't have the exact release date yet. However, if people follow me on my website, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and the handles for all those is Holliworks. It's HOLLIWORKS. So my website's holliworks.com, and all the other handles, you just search for that, you'll find it. Those announcements will be out there, and it will be at an Amazon website near you.
Okay. And I do want to encourage the listeners to check out your website. David's got some great blog posts. I've been stalking you, David.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's a little ninja in me. But yeah, it's fantastic. So.
Oh, and if listeners go out there to holliworks.com, they can download the first chapter of the book.
Oh, great.
So put your email address on there, and I will send you the first chapter, and you'll get notified of the release.
Excellent. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. You are wonderful to talk to. And
Thank you.
So excited about your book, and just, very impressed of the action that you've taken over the years, and what an incredible recovery and incredible story.
Well, thank you very much. And if your listeners want to reach out, I'll be happy to respond.
Excellent. Thank you. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And remember to focus on getting past the fear, to get to the fun on the other side. And remember to just get out the door, because that is the way of the FemiNinja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.